these are not things that people say in property management, right? These are pattern interrupts, and you were telling it as a story. You start telling a story, and when that story matches up with my reality, I'm just like, I actually can't believe I found you. This is destiny. And so
Yep.
I just want to say, like, it was amazing. That is a fantastic illustration of what we should be aspiring to do with any business.
Welcome to the Property Management Success Podcast, where we interview leaders in the industry to uncover the secrets to profitability, efficiency, and achieving true freedom, whether it's your time, money, or lifestyle. I'm your host, Tony Cline, and I'm here to help you build a wildly successful property management business. Let's get to it. Welcome back to another episode of the Property Management Success Podcast. Today, really excited. Got some good friends in the studio with me today. I've got Jeremy Pound and Jennifer Merritt. They are both from RentScale and StrategicPM. And we're going to talk about business development. We're going to talk about growth. And we're going to talk about something that people often miss in the industry. So we'll circle back around and tie that in. But Jeremy, how's it going for you this morning?
It's great. It's good to be here with you.
Yeah. Hello, Jen.
Hey, Tony. How's it going?
Good. You and I actually don't live that far from each other.
I know. It's crazy that we're doing this in separate spaces. We should probably just be together.
Yeah, probably. All right. Well, I was excited to have you guys on because there's a lot of talk in the industry about sales for property management and operations for property management. And we've spent some time recently talking about operations and how operations operates one way, and then sales organizations or sales people typically operate a little bit differently. And I just wanted, you guys are two of the foremost experts in the space in business development and property management. And so I wanted to have you on and just have an open discussion about what you guys are seeing trend-wise, what's working for owners of property management companies, and then what's not. So I'd kind of like to start with just seeing, what are you guys seeing right now as a major trend in business development? Because I know that it changes over time, what's working and what's not. And if you're not in a group like, and we can share a little bit about the group that you guys have, but if you're not in something like that, you just don't know what's going on and what's working and what's not. So I'd love to start with just a nugget for these guys. What do you guys see that's really working right now?
Jeremy, you
want
want
to
to
take
kick us
that
off?
since you're in the field day to day.
Okay. So we're actually seeing a couple of things that are working really well. One of them is outbound lead generation and working with not just agents for referrals, but true outbound. Like, we're making outbound calls. We actually have a time block every single week where people can jump on with us, and we do call blitzes where everybody's on Zoom, but they're on mute, and they have to make as many calls as possible, and they have a coach sitting right there to help them through when their script is or isn't working. So gaining lots of traction on that, and that seems to be something that's going really well in our community right now. The other thing that I would say is really working is a focus on many different lead sources across the entire buyer's pyramid. So I did some research just recently and was talking a lot about leads with people, and everybody wants the leads at the top of the buyer's pyramid, ready to buy today. They're qualified. They are the perfect fit client. Like, that's what we want. Yeah, I get that. But what's actually working is nurturing people who maybe haven't even considered real estate investment at all, from the bottom of the triangle all the way to the point that they are ready to buy. That's actually working really well for our community.
Jeremy, anything to add before we move on to the next topic?
Yeah, I mean, what Jen, just to kind of add to what Jen's saying, like, the thing that never goes out of style is building a list and warming those people and trying to get in front of them no matter where they're at. And so obviously the only things that change are the mediums that you use to get in front of people, to nurture them, right? For a long time, it was all about email marketing only. Now we know social media is a fantastic way to do that. All kinds of subscribers, podcasts like this. We're nurturing clients right now with this content. So, I mean, the fundamental that just never goes away is meet people that look a whole heck lot like your clients, build a list and stay in touch with them and make them offers so that they raise their hand and they buy. But everybody says, that is a lot of work. Let's talk about AI. Let's talk about, what video I can do. Let's, where can I buy the leads from? And I think they're just overlooking a fundamental that they'll eventually learn. That's just going to cost them a lot of money for a lot of years and a lot of heartache. And then they'll eventually be like, oh, geez, I wish I would have started earlier.
So you brought up something that I love to talk about, because before I got into real estate, and this is, again, I bought my property management company in the year 2000, so I've been doing this for 25 years. But before that, I had a technology business. And in the technology business, we had a sales department, and then we had a marketing department. And our sales were hunters. They weren't sitting around, they were out hunting. And then we had our marketers that were out there planting seeds. And there's been this change. I don't know when it came about. I don't know where it came from, but this transition into BDM, business development. And I feel like if you take a salesperson and give them anything that they can do other than make a sales call, they will jump on that. So if you give them KPIs to make 5 LinkedIn connections, or like 5 people's posts on Facebook, or whatever it is where you're trying to build connection, they will jump all over that, and they will feel like they've had a really busy, productive day. But in reality, they didn't tell anybody about what they do. And so how do you guys reconcile? Is that just old school thinking where you really need to have people focusing on that sales component? And how does that mix with the business development and marketing? Because most property management companies aren't big enough to have 2 separate departments handling those things.
I'll jump on that. I'll just do a quick story, and then I want Jen to elaborate on that, because that is the issue. What you're saying, Tony, is that we all kind of know the right way to do it. We know that shouldn't be blended. We know we ended up with like a meatball Sunday if we start asking one person to do 3 jobs, but then we all just tell ourselves we're too small for that. And well, that is the scrappiness of being an entrepreneur, for sure. And when we launched RentScale, I did all the sales, for sure, and I had to do that, and I did all the delivery, and it was exhausting. I had to make the leap at some point to say, if you want to be bigger, you have to act bigger. And I think everybody's waiting for the magic tide to break, and then it's like, okay, now I'm bigger, now I can actually start doing the things that I read about and that I watch YouTubes about and that I know I should be doing. There is always the proverbial leap of faith, The hardest thing about entrepreneurship is making sure you're reaching, but you're not reaching so far that you fall off the cliff, right? And so I think that is kind of the hard part, is that we say, yes, I value all these things, but I just don't have the manpower to do it. So I'm just going to bury one person with 5 jobs. And unfortunately, I've yet to see somebody dig themselves out of the hole with that much weight on their shoulders. And if you ask if it goes out of style, I'll just tell you a quick story about, I remember interviewing Jen when she came here, and she was a sales manager. She was managing multiple BDMs all over the country. And she said something like, if I get on a sales call and you're not in your car, you're doing something wrong. And I was like, that's all I need to hear. Like, you're hired. Let's go.
I agree. I do think that, Tony, there should be this line between sales and marketing. And I 100% agree with you that if you give sales anything to do other than hunt and outbound prospect and connect with the leads and build those relationships, that's what they're going to do first. So we always talk in our community about high payoff activities. And what are those things? And so many property management company owners want a BDM to be the jack of all trades. They want them to be doing social media marketing. They want them to be writing blogs. They want them to be showing homes. They want them to be collecting keys. They want them to be processing the paperwork and onboarding all of the new clients. And the matter of the fact is that the more things your BDM has to do, the more excuses they will have to get out of it. I will tell a story from when I was a BDM. I did not like cold calling, just like most people don't like cold calling, right? But I got results when I did the cold calling from the right places. But it was always the last thing that I wanted to do. And it wasn't until I got the discipline to say no to all of those other things that I was able to really be successful in my role. And I was signing 15 and 20 doors a month when I got disciplined to say, I'll get the W9 and I'll make sure that I collect all the information you need from the HOA and get the management agreement signed, but that's where I stop. I stopped there because I found so much traction when I networked with developers. When I went out to new home build communities and talked to the sales consultants that are sitting in the models. When I networked with real estate agents and I met 1031 exchange agents, that built my network so much bigger than I was ever going to build by liking or responding to a comment on social media or putting together a newsletter or a blog post. Those are important things that have to happen, I think, at a company, any company, and that do give us traction and leads. But at the end of the day, I don't believe that that's a high payoff activity for a salesperson, and they will find every corner and crevice, because I was that person, to hide in when it comes to not making those outbound calls.
Absolutely.
And if I can add to that, Jen, if you don't
100%.
mind, because I'm just picturing, like, I cannot agree more with what Jen's saying, but I've got the voice of the viewer in my head. And, when we talk about outdated, here's the thing is that technology is amazing. And the more you know the fundamentals and the more you believe in the fundamentals, the easier it is to look at every new technology through the right lens. So there was that huge thing about social selling, and everyone was like, social selling is going to be amazing. And I learned that trend, 10 years ago. But the real people that were winning were still doing outbound. They just knew that social media was an underutilized tool, and it was a way to break through the noise instead of calling somebody. And so they did the same thing. They would reach out to people, they would DM them, they would talk to them, but they'd still set meetings and they'd still make offers. We do a ton of outbound with video. It feels like an age-old technology, but with BombBomb and Loom and getting your face in front of people, it's proven to work. But the fundamentals are all kind of the same, right? I still need to meet strangers that look a whole heck of a lot like my customers, and I still need to make them offers and try to get in front of them. I think that there's some amazing technologies. I don't think LinkedIn is used enough. If you're a power LinkedIn user and you get on their tools that are very expensive, and I appreciate that, you can build a list of all of the service providers in your area. You can find real estate investors, and you can do the fundamentals, which is reach out to strangers, tell them that you've got value to add to them, see if the timing is right, and see if you can make them an offer. So the methods are changing, but what I think everybody's looking for is for the method, the technology to make the fundamentals go away, and that just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I agree. Especially as we get more and more advanced technology, more AI entering into the space, what it's going to come down to is what makes you different is you, and it's the relationships that you build with people. And in marketing, we've got to be able to set ourselves outside of the noise. There's a lot of noise, and we get bombarded with, I think it's like 11 million bits of information per second, and our reticular activating system will filter out about 40 to 50 of those. And what gets filtered out is things that are already important to our prospect, our target client, as I call them. And so we need to be able to speak to that. And you've said this a couple of times now already, finding people who look a lot like our customers or our clients. And I think a lot of business owners, especially when they're smaller and they haven't had a chance to bring on a business development person, but even with that person, bringing somebody new in the industry when you've come into the space, you have not taken the time to identify your target client, who's the center of the bullseye that you're trying to serve. And I'll start working with clients, and we'll start talking about, well, who is your property management company for? And they're like, well, anybody in the Phoenix area or anybody in Colorado. And it's like, if you're for everybody, you're for nobody, because you're just a part of the noise. And I've said this pretty frequently lately, but in the client's mind, in the prospect's mind, we are all the same to them. We're all the same. And if we're all the same, then why would I pay more for one person than another person if I'm going to get the same thing? So we're all the same until we're not. What can we do to speak directly to their pain points and then identify those pain points and then provide a solution? And by doing that, you do rise above the noise. You do make it through their reticular activating filter. And so I'd like to hear a little bit about what you guys have found with that, identifying the clients. Is that something that you take people through? How do you help people, whether it's the business development person or the broker or owner of the company that's doing it themselves?
Yeah, so we call that ideal client profile here, Tony. And yes, we have, anytime anybody goes through Blueprint with us, they sit through 2 meetings. One is ideal client profile, where I will actually push them on who their ideal client is. And it is an unacceptable answer when they're like, everybody in Colorado is my client. I'm like, no, let's go through your property management company and I'll show you why everyone is not your ideal client. And so we actually do that exercise, and I do a really fun exercise because I find that every property manager wants to come back to me and they say, my ideal client is someone who is going to be hands off. They don't want to be involved in this. They are financially well off. They have multiple properties, or they are going to have multiple properties in the future. And I'm like, you're not describing your ideal client. You're describing what you want and what your lens is. And so I take people through an exercise and I ask them to describe someone who would buy a Land Rover, Range Rover Sport. And everyone is full of oh, they're, soccer moms, financially stable, probably have a, job that is keeping everything, like they're killing it corporate, or their husband is a doctor. Like, they have all these ways that they're describing it. And I'm like, oh, where do they hang out on the weekends? And they're like, they hang out at the golf clubs, and they love brands like, whatever. They love the high-end brands, Gucci or whatever. So they can describe these people, and they know that they have a life and what their life looks like. And then I'm like, okay, now describe a Subaru driver. And they can do the same. But when it comes to us identifying our ideal clients in this industry, for some reason, everyone defaults to what they want, and they're not thinking about their actual ideal client. And so I try really hard to get people in the mindset of, think about who your ideal client is and what they need from you, and then if your service provides that. And if it doesn't, then we need to build that in, and that is your differentiation. And the two should really link up. And when you have a great targeted ideal client, and you know who they are and what they value, and you have differentiation that matches that, you have an unstoppable sales message that differentiates you from everybody else. Because Tony, I think you're right. In the prospect's mind, even though we know it's not true, in the prospect's mind, everybody is thinking, well, you lease the same, and you screen tenants the same, and you market the same, and you're gonna handle maintenance pretty much the same. So like, what do I do? And that's where I think the ideal client and the differentiation parallel and give you that message that helps you stand out above the crowd. I could go on for hours about this because I think it's so important.
I think to tie this in, not just for the people, the type of people we're trying to attract, but once we sign them, I've heard companies brag about how they add a door a day, and yet they've been the same size for 7 years. And it's because they're adding whoever and however, but on the back end, they're churning them out just as fast. And so it's not just about the sales process of identifying and I'm gonna continue to use target client profile, because for me, it's hunting, right? We have our ideal client, but I want to go out and specifically target them. I'm wanting it to be more active and proactive. So that's why it's the same thing, but I just want to continue to use that term. So
can I ask you to share? You said something that I love one time years ago. You may not remember this, but I know you're going to know it. You said street runners run for the miles, but trail runners never want to come back. What is it that you said to me about the difference between trail runners never wanting to come back, or what was it? What was the tagline you gave me? It was so good.
Boy, I wish I could remember. I don't know, but street runners are just putting in the steps, putting in the miles. But yeah, trail runners out there, blazing the trails,
yes,
finding their own course.
I wish you had it perfectly, but you left me with this impression that street runners were running to get it over with, and trail runners couldn't wait to get back out on the next run.
It's about the experience.
And just to take it full circle from what you asked and what Jen just said, going back to content and building that list, like your vibe attracts your tribe, right? And so I think that when we come from this like scarcity mindset, where like there's only so many properties, like I have to go out and I have to just be the best service provider. But there's, I'm sure there are different people that listen to your podcast than people that listen to the other, 29 podcasts for property managers. And it's not always because of like the fundamental things you do. Sometimes it's also because the way you look at the world, the way that you're looking at the way that you're attracting wealth and growing everything. So sometimes it's not just about like the pragmatic fundamentals of the business. Sometimes it's about the personality, and that's what brands are. When Jen talks about like the Range Rover versus the Subaru, I mean, if you brought aliens from another planet here and they had to inspect the mechanical parts, they probably couldn't tell you there was anything different. But the way those vehicles make you feel and what they say about you are not to be underlooked. But it takes a mature business mind and an abundance mindset to really be like, oh, that actually matters to people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and once it matters, then you identify why it matters, and you find those trigger points that help you just get in alignment with them. And then to finish out my point about the churn on the back end, we're not just creating this profile of the person we want to attract, but we're creating the profile of who we're going to build the business around. So it does flow through into operations, so that if I'm attracting someone with a message, when they come through my front door and come into my environment, they see that what was promised, what was talked about, is actually being delivered. And so it's so key to identify that on the sales side, but also keep that flowing through operations. And I think that's where a lot of people miss the mark, is even if they have this conversation, even if they go through this exercise, it stops at the chasm between sales and operations. And so sales gets it, and operations is just like, well, it's just one more account we brought on. I don't really know what they're looking for or how to speak to them, or is this a true investor? Is this an accidental landlord? And our messaging when we send out emails, that should be different. It should be different, targeting, are they an accidental landlord that care about these set of criteria, or is it an investor that cares about this set of criteria? And
I agree, Tony. I can't, this drives me crazy when I get on the blueprint calls. I actually have to have, I don't want to call them arguments, although you know, and Jeremy knows very well, I can argue with the best of them. But I really ask people to think about who they're built for. And they're like, I'm built for anybody who needs property management. And I just think so many people come to me and immediately when I say, who's your ideal client profile, they say an investor. And I'm like, why are you built for an investor? What do you do that helps investors versus an accidental landlord or versus a self-managing landlord? What in your process speaks to an investor? And they're like, I don't know. And then we dive in and it turns out that they're actually well built for someone who is a self-managing landlord that we can help kind of transition and grow into professional property management, hands off, like that takes time, but that's what their process is built for. And so by the end of these conversations, people are like, well, but the investors come with multiple units. And I'm like, but I'm here to help you get more clients you love, not just fill your space with junk that churns out. And so I really push hard on this, and I could not agree with you more that we should be speaking to and interacting with an investor when they get into operations different than we would be speaking and interacting with a self-manager or an accidental.
Yep. And when I talk about identifying those target client profiles, generally people have not even started with one. So we start with one. It's not impossible to have more than one and to have multiple processes, one for each different client type, but that's kind of an advanced level. Most people are not even figuring out one way to message. So an example of what you're talking about, identifying your who you want to serve and being really clear about it. When I first bought my company, I really bought a brokerage, and we were managing 31 doors, and I didn't even know that until I started doing the due diligence. It wasn't even brought up in our initial conversations. But after I bought that, I looked at, okay, where do I want to serve? Where in the marketplace am I a good fit? And so, and Jen, you'll know this because you're from the area, but we were east of I-25, north of Colfax, south of Park Avenue. And so it was really what in the old MLS, it was called DTD, or downtown Denver. And we bought an office down there, and we told people, if it's too far to walk, it's too far. But if my team can walk to your property, why would you use anyone else? We are the downtown Denver specialists. And so we even focused on, even just right on the other side of Colfax, that was a mental barrier for people. People don't like to cross Colfax because it's a busy street. And if you're working with people who are moving to the area because of the environment and the atmosphere, renting out properties on the other side of Colfax, it's a mental barrier. And so we got really specific on, we work with properties that only have HOAs, properties that don't have a roof or a foundation. And we got so specific, and then we figured out what those business owners, or those property owners are really looking for. And once we solved that, once we mastered that, then we were able to add on and stack from there. But we got laser focused, started a fire there, and then started working our way out through the edges. And I think if people do that, you really have a much better chance of serving multiple client types than just saying, I serve multiple client types off the bat.
I think that's what people. Go ahead.
Sorry. I would just say, not that you're not the most interesting person I know, Tony, but over this entire conversation, when you started explaining that, I could feel like my awareness raising, because you were telling a story, right? So instead of listing what we did, you basically said, yeah, you don't want to go past this street. We don't manage anything with a roof or a foundation. These are not things that people say in property management, right? These are pattern interrupts, and you were telling it as a story. And so when people say, why would I do that? That is one of the unappreciated reasons, is that now when you hire me as a BDM, I don't have to talk about my credentials or how much NARPM certifications my property managers have, or these other things that mean absolutely freaking nothing to a first-time investor, or even an experienced investor, to be honest with you. You start telling a story, and when that story matches up with my reality, I'm just like, I actually can't believe I found you. This is destiny. And so
Yep.
I just want to say, it was amazing. I don't think you were trying to do that, but that is a fantastic illustration of what we should be aspiring to do with any business.
Now think about this. How much would you pay for somebody that specializes in that versus somebody that says, oh, I manage all over the state of Colorado?
Oh, no,
No.
I'm an investor. It's only about the numbers for me. I don't actually care about brand or service or vibe. No way. It's all about the spreadsheet, which we know is not true, because as soon as you started talking, I became completely seduced and I started listening to you. So
Yeah.
I think it's exactly it. I think that is the myth we need to break down, is that people who hire a property manager are just about the dollars and the cents, because it's just way too complicated of a product. Sure, you can pay 2% less today, but if every 4 years I'm coming back with $10,000 more in repair than you would have had otherwise, was it really about the dollars and the cents, right? And so it's just too complicated of a calculation at the outset, which is one of the hardest things about buying property management services, is it's a short-term decision for a long-term outcome. And that's why the stories actually are really compelling.
I want to ask you, you touched on something, and I want to take it in this direction because I have a lot of conversations around this. There is a difference between the accidental landlord and a true investor. And if you look statistically, and I want you, if you have different research, then I want you to call me out on this. But the research that I've seen is that most people that own investment properties, or most single family investment properties are owned by somebody that owns 2 or fewer. And I think it's 76, 78%, something like that. Which means, yes, you can go out and find an investor that owns 5 properties, but the odds of you talking to someone like that is there's fewer of them out there, and they care more about the spreadsheets, the dollars and cents. Most people we were 2 people, we became a couple, we decided it wasn't a good time to sell, or we said, hey, what if we rented it out and we could make some money? And so they move into one of the 2 properties, they have the other property available, they know the neighbors, they used to live there, they know the community, So they're concerned more about, I don't want to be an embarrassment to my neighbors. Little Susie used to live or sleep in that bedroom. We painted it pink. Can we leave it pink because, we painted a custom mural on there. Can you just rent it out like that? They have these different concerns. And so from my standpoint, I've seen much greater success targeting those accidental landlords and identifying the stories and the pain points and making more money with them than targeting the investor who has 5 doors, who feels like, well, because I have 5 doors, I deserve special considerations, I deserve special pricing, and and by the way, I need these other reports that you don't actually do inside of your business process, so I'm going to have you do things differently that are going to break, and then I'm going to be upset about it. So what is your experience? You guys work with way more people on the business development side. Are you seeing more people with the accidental landlords or true investors? And are the ratios that I just talked about, do they seem somewhat accurate?
I think the ratios you talked about are somewhat accurate. I think that the go-to is investors because a lot of PMs think that that's the easy button. I've found that that's opposite, but you can be really well suited for investors, and you also can and should, if you're the right company, target them. So like I have got a client who owns a construction company and he networks with constantly developers, and he is a flipper of homes himself, and he speaks the asset management language. Like when I got on with him, he couldn't stop talking about cash flow and cap rates, and they have spreadsheets that help their investors see what levers they can pull in their properties that make them more and less profitable. They do what we teach in Genesis, which is asset management reviews. So there are people that are built for that. However, what I see, Tony, is the accidentals, sure, in a lot of markets, I completely agree with you, but I'm really encouraging people to go after the self-managing landlords. That's where I think there is a pot of gold that nobody's paying attention to, and all we need is just a little bit of language to help these people who think that property management is too expensive, who think that they're going to lose control, who are afraid that we're, as property managers, going to place the wrong tenant. We just have to have language and really good objection handling around those things so that we can talk at an educated level about our ideal client. We understand what they want, right? And so I've been encouraging a lot of my clients as I dive into their businesses to actually chase the self-managing landlords. I think if we can bring something to them that they hadn't considered, or something they had a miscommunication or misperception about, that when we can open their eyes and that light bulb goes off, that's when we create those long-term relationships. That's when we build that trust. And those people aren't going to churn out because we're actually helping them with a clear problem that they have. So I love the accidentals, and I agree with you. I think there's a lot of people out there who, coupled up and need to sell a home, but they decide not to sell it, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But I think that the market of self-managing landlords is crazy. Now, Reese on our team, he's going to write an article for StrategicPM coming out in the next issue called The Rise of the Accidental. And I think there are going to be more of those too. So if I was in the business and I had my property management company and I specifically wanted to target a profile, I would be going after those two for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I oversimplified by creating those 2 buckets just to draw a line between the investor who's a true investor out there looking at multiple units and even buildings and that. So thank you for making that distinction. There are actually 3 buckets, and I put 2 of those into one. But I want to circle back around. You talked about the person who owns the construction company who speaks that language. He's got the story to tell. To tie it back to what Jeremy was saying earlier, he's got the story to tell about how he works with those people. So if you're not that guy, if you don't have that story to tell, if you don't have that background, then find what your story is, find what your background is and how it applies, because trying to fake being that guy and talk to true investors who care about those things, it's just not going to work out. It's better to find the people who identify with your background and what you have to offer, and maybe it is the accidental landlord, maybe it's the self-managing landlord, and maybe it is the investor, but don't try to be something that you're not, because you see that's what other people are doing in the marketplace. I see that huge in leading people down the wrong path as they look around their market and they look at pricing and they look at offers and the services and they say, well, if that's what other people do, that's what I need to do. And I think that's a big, big mistake. So, all right, we're kind of coming up on needing to make some transitions because you and I, we have some exciting things to talk about. So both of you are going to be at our retreat that we're having in Keystone, Colorado in July, and you're going to be there speaking as two of our experts that are there to talk about business development, but all things business, all things you guys have seen throughout your careers. You're going to be in the room, sitting at the table with people. We have 6 expert coaches, and we only have 13 attendees. And so with that, if you attend the event, you are going to be sitting in, rubbing elbows, going on hikes, eating meals with our experts. And I'm so excited to have you guys there and participating. And I'm just really looking forward to the value you guys are going to bring. You're a wealth of knowledge. You guys have been in this industry for a long time. You've essentially created this category of business development and training around that. And I also want to give you guys the opportunity to talk about an event that you have coming up after that. So, yeah, why don't we share a little bit about the Strategic Event Summit?
You go first, Jen. I'll add some thoughts, but you paint the vision for us.
So the Strategic PM Summit is happening in August on the 21st and 22nd. We're gonna go to Fort Lauderdale. So Keystone, awesome location, Tony. Fort Lauderdale, we're gonna switch it up, beach vibes. It's gonna be awesome. So we're very excited about that. But at that, it's for property management entrepreneurs. So we're really bringing in the leaders of property management companies who are ready to think differently and think bigger about their business. We are not going to get into the weeds of pricing or maintenance or anything like that. This is a very high level conference about strategy, but I want to kind of put a caveat to that. It's not about strategy in property management, although we will have a day on that. I think the really exciting thing is Jeremy and I see so many opportunities outside of this industry that we don't leverage here in property management. And so we're going to bring in speakers from outside the industry who have done amazing things with companies like Chick-fil-A and Ritz-Carlton. These are top-notch, world-class speakers. And they're coming into this workshop style environment. They're gonna give a 1-hour session, and then similar to what you have going, Tony, we are gonna sit down with them, and they're gonna be at a table of about 8 people, and you are gonna be able to ask these professionals that have built companies like Ritz-Carlton and Chick-fil-A and some of the big, really well-known companies out there, questions about your business, direct questions related to each pillar of strategy. So that's really exciting. And then on day 2, we're bringing in people like yourself, you're going to be there, from property management, who are going to talk about property management specific in relation to strategy. So I think the really cool thing is you're going to get both sides of it. You're going to get to see things from outside the industry, ways we can innovate, ways that we can be pioneers, and things that we can bring in that have worked for other companies. And we're going to get into the weeds of, okay, now let's bring that down to the level that you're at. And the people that have been most successful, just like yourself, coming in, and same kind of thing, workshop, you're going to get to sit down with these people, and you are actually going to get to ask them, hey, here's my business challenge in this category, what would you do? And we want those experts to be guiding you and answering specific to your business.
Here's why I'm so excited about both of these events. There are events in the property management space like the Systems Conference, which is how do we actually break down and implement and put in new technology and things like that. And it's absolutely needed, but that's one focus. Then there are things like the NARPM National Conference where you bring your team to and they just sort of learn a little bit about the operations, the fundamentals of property management. And that's needed, and there's that place. But when we started talking about these two events, we both were planning separately and came together. Just, I don't know if it was by coincidence or just because we think at that same high level, but there was no event specifically for the owner of a company to be trained on how to own a company. And we're going to take that initial focus and we're going to layer on top of that then the property management piece of not just how to be a business owner, but now how do you be a property management business owner that will provide the type of lifestyle that will allow you to extract yourself from the day-to-day and think bigger and take the time to focus on the things that are going to truly make a difference and move that business in the direction that you want it to go so that it supports the lifestyle that you want to live and ultimately have the business be an asset for you versus something that owns you. So super excited about that. If you're listening to this, you really should come to both events. But if you don't come to both, you need to at least come to one, because if you don't, you're going to be missing out on an opportunity that does not come around. We've not seen anything like this in the space, and it just so happens that we're both providing you with opportunities to take advantage of that. And again, slightly different settings, and so it would not be a mistake to attend both of these events. So with that, Jeremy, I know you said you wanted to circle back around and see if there was anything left on the table that we didn't already scoop up, but anything you want to say about either of the events?
You guys nailed it. I love these events. What I do want to say, which I think is important, which I've had a lot of conversations about these events, and we have so many events in this industry, which is amazing. What I want to say about what I think Tony is doing and what we're doing is, by the way, the three of us on the call, I'm the only one that's actually not worked at a property management company, right? You guys have. I think RentScale was founded on this idea of there's so much amazing things happening in service-based small businesses that we're overlooking because we're so buried in the weeds of running a property management company. And so I say that because I want you to forget everything you know about the other industry events you go to. When I go to these events, and then Jen and I go to other events, it just is very clear to me that all the events that we go to are, this is what I did, and you should do it too. And I think both of us are creating events to create white space to say, we want to create the entrepreneurs who are going to do something who will then be speaking at the next broker owner, at the next event, because you're out actually innovating. So that's why I'm bringing in the people that I have learned from, like Mike Michalowicz from the Pumpkin Plan, and John DeJulius, which Jen was setting up, and Lance Lambert, who's going to be talking about real estate trends. The point is that you should come here and say, this is unlike anything I've ever been to. And when Tony painted his vision, it was the same way. And so it's easy to just have kind of a mental mindset of like what a property management event looks like. And then you say, I've had enough of that. And I would just say that I just want to paint a picture that we are trying to create the leaders that everybody else will be talking about later at both of these events. And that's only going to resonate with a certain amount of people. But those are the people that should really come to our events.
Yeah. It's funny because we both specifically chose not to call it a conference because they're not, and they need to be perceived differently. So ours is a retreat, a small, personalized, individual experience. And then yours is a summit where you're doing the same thing. You're just providing multiple different businesses to come in to talk at a high level and then breaking it down into those intimate, smaller groups. So
and I think we called it a summit because of the alliteration of StrategicPM. But honestly, when Jen and I work on this, we call it a workshop. This was highly influenced by us going out to Vegas to Alex Ramosey's workshop, 2 days. We literally started with a blank workbook and we worked on our business and we left. And they asked us, how much revenue did you add to your business in these 2 days? And we wrote down big numbers. And so our guarantee is that if you come and you don't add $250,000 of revenue in the next year to your business, this workshop was a failure. So it is much more hands-on. This isn't, I pick some sessions, I go to some other sessions. just like yours. This is like immersive experience, and I leave with tangible value. And so I really appreciate that neither of these are conferences. It's a great point.
Yep. All right, guys. I wish we had more time, and the unfortunate thing is we don't, because we both have to hop into another meeting here pretty soon about the Grand Canyon Rim to Rim trip that we're taking. There's 30 of us entrepreneurs in the property management space going to be hiking rim to rim, so we have to jump over to that. But there is so much more that we could cover on business development, growth, how to help businesses grow, how to help property management owners transition from being the person that is out there doing the business development to trusting someone else to do that, training them up, getting them prepared, giving them the tools and resources, and we're just out of time. So I'd love to do one of two things. I'd love to have you guys back on at a later time, and I can't wait to have you share all of that information and help the people that show up to our retreat with that. So I am going to give you both the last word. Anything that we could have covered, should have covered in the last couple of minutes, and then we'll wrap up.
I just want to say I appreciate you, Tony. I like that you got a big vision and you're not willing to do things the way that everybody says you got to do them. I appreciate that about you.
Jeremy deserves the last word. So can you say the last word real quick, Jeremy?
No, you can go. That's done.
All right, guys. It was great having you on, and we'll connect again soon.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Tony.
Thanks. Thanks for tuning in to the Property Management Success Podcast. We'll be back with another value-packed episode to help you level up your property management game. If you've got something valuable out of today's episode, please share it with a friend or colleague, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a review so you never miss out on future insights and strategies and tactics. Until next time, here's to your success.